Imagine walking out onto a beautiful sandy path stretching directly across the ocean floor. Birds are gathering, people are strolling. It feels like a perfectly normal day at the coast. But just 6 hours later, that exact same spot is gone. There is no explosion and no earthquake. The land simply disappears, leaving nothing but open ocean. At Mont Saint-Michel in France, the island is often surrounded by miles of dry mudflats, exposing the seabed to the open air. Within hours, the sea returns. The plains are entirely swallowed, cutting the island off from the mainland. This occurs at specific locations across the globe. Events like the Jindo Sea parting in South Korea draw thousands of people who race to walk across a temporary path on the ocean floor. While ancient sailors once whispered that these vanishing lands were magical or cursed, they are actually predictable geographical anomalies driven by an invisible force. Because these landscapes look so serene, visitors often miscalculate the environment. It's easy to assume the water will return slowly and predictably, much like a typical beach. The reality is much faster. The ocean can race back across these flat expanses at speeds that trap people kilometers from the shore within minutes. The physical threat is high enough that local authorities must install sirens, flashing lights, and warning signs to alert visitors before the terrain shifts. Despite these measures, rescue teams are forced to launch multiple operations every year to save tourists who have become stranded by the rising water. Surviving this environment requires an understanding of the massive celestial mechanism that controls it. The engine driving this earthly illusion actually lies hundreds of thousands of miles away in space. This is the tidal bulge. The moon's gravity constantly stretches our oceans outward. Combined with the sun's pull, these forces move colossal seawater masses. The islands aren't sinking, the bulges remain stationary. Earth simply spins, rotating the land into deep water and back out. This celestial alignment creates a rhythm that determines exactly when the land is accessible and when it belongs to the sea. For most coastlines, this cycle takes exactly 12 hours and 25 minutes, operating as a giant natural clock. In specific geographies, this pull causes extreme fluctuations. In Canada's Bay of Fundy, the water level changes by over 50 feet, taller than a 4-story building. Local marine life has adapted to these constant changes. Crabs burrow into the wet sand to wait out the dry phase, while small fish find shelter in shallow pools. This temporary exposure creates a vital feeding ground. Migratory birds arrive to feast on the exposed seabed before the window closes and the land disappears again. It is a dynamic ecosystem where life thrives because the environment completely resets its physical state twice a day. However, scientists are noticing that these natural clocks are beginning to shift, and the daily disappearances are lasting longer. This graph shows the global sea level baseline. Over the last several decades, the overall ocean level has steadily risen. Because these islands sit on a razor-thin margin, a slight increase shrinks the time they spend above the surface. Many sandbanks and coastal pathways already spend significantly less time above water today than they did in the past. The very definition of these islands is changing. A cycle that was once a temporary daily illusion is transitioning into a permanent state. A permanent disappearance will fracture these specialized ecosystems and force human coastal communities to abandon the borders they've relied on for centuries. These landscapes are becoming more fleeting. We are approaching a future where the tide comes in and simply never rolls back out. Disappearing islands remind us that the rhythms of our coastlines are sensitive to change, and nature's daily cycles can eventually become permanent.